Welcome to the deep dive. So, you sent us some really interesting material this time, all focusing on those, physical feelings, the ones that are so tied up with our
Yeah,
emotions.
exactly. Bodily sensations.
Right. And our mission here is to, well, dig into these chapters you shared, pull out the key ideas, and give you some practical ways to understand and maybe manage these sensations better.
Absolutely. We're looking closely at the parts about understanding and confronting these feelings, including, those workbook pages and forms you might have seen.
And the really core idea, I think, is how much these physical sensations actually shape our emotions. It's something we often maybe overlook.
Definitely. It's not just thoughts and actions.
No. What's happening in our bodies, and this is crucial how we interpret what's happening, that massively impacts how we feel. So we're going to unpack that.
And hopefully give you some real strategy to work with.
Yeah, because there's a potential aha moment in this, isn't there? Like really getting this connection, it could be a game changer for navigating those really intense emotions.
It really can be. Understanding that link is powerful.
Okay, so let's dive in. The material revisits this idea of the three parts of emotion. Remember that. Thoughts, behaviors.
And physical sensations, they're all interconnected.
And the key thing emphasized here is that these sensations aren't just like a passive side effect. They're active players. They actually shape the emotional response.
Precisely. They're integral, as the material puts it. They contribute, and they can really ramp up the intensity of whatever you're feeling.
Let's think examples. Anxiety, right? Often comes with that racing heart, maybe feeling short of breath.
Yeah, or depression that can feel like just, ugh, heavy fatigue, a real physical weight.
Or anger, you might feel muscle tension, maybe getting hot.
And things like guilt or shame, maybe that twist in your stomach,
Yeah.
or getting flushed.
Exactly. And the material's clear. These are, pretty normal bodily responses. It's how emotions show up physically.
But here's where it gets tricky. These sensations themselves can actually make the emotions feel much harder to handle. They can amplify things.
Right. How does that work? Well, the material points out a few ways. Like, the sensations can make you feel like you just can't cope.
Uh-huh. That tension might make it hard to focus on work, maybe?
Yeah, or feeling breathless could make even a simple task seem impossible.
And then there's the misinterpretation piece. That racing heart. During anxiety, it's easy to think, oh no, this is a panic attack starting.
Right, mistaking it for something dangerous.
Which spirals things, obviously.
And then the social angle too, right?
Yeah.
Worrying if people notice you're blushing or sweating.
Yeah, the fear of judgment. That adds another layer.
Yeah.
And the sources also mention how these feelings can make you feel like you're losing control.
Which is a scary thought in itself.
Definitely. And there's a more subtle thing, too. Just feeling those sensations can sometimes make the negative thoughts seem more valid, more real.
Like the stomach ache during guilt somehow proves you did something awful.
Exactly. It reinforces the negative narrative.
Okay, so this brings us to interpretation and context. This feels like a really key insight from the materials.
It absolutely is. That playground or amusement park analogy they use is brilliant.
It really is. Dizziness, racing heart, feeling breathless.
Kids seek that out. It's fun in that context.
But take those exact same sensations, put them in a moment of anxiety.
And suddenly they feel terrifying, dangerous.
Yeah.
It really highlights how much our mindset, our context, shapes the experience.
Totally. The sensations aren't inherently bad. It's the story we attach.
And the material points out, like you said, the same sensation, flushing, for example, can mean totally different things.
Pride, embarrassment, anger, all could make you flush. Depends on the thoughts, the situation.
So it really drills down. It's not the physical feeling itself that's the core issue most of the time. It's how we interpret it that makes it feel threatening.
Okay, so knowing that, what's the common but maybe not helpful way people try to deal? Avoidings, right?
Yep. Classic strategy.
Right.
But the sources are very clear. It tends to backfire.
How so?
Well, by trying to avoid the sensations and anything that might trigger them, maybe avoiding exercise or tough conversations or even caffeine, you actually end up giving them more power. You teach yourself subconsciously that you can't handle them.
Ah, so it keeps you on edge, more sensitive.
Exactly. You remain vigilant, hypersensitive, because you've learned to see them as threats you must avoid.
Okay, so if avoidance doesn't work, what's the alternative the material suggests? This thing called interoceptive exposure.
Yes. Getting comfortable with the discomfort is a fundamental shift.
Tell me more about that.
Well, the idea is to deliberately, intentionally bring on those physical sensations, but in a safe, controlled way.
Okay, why?
The goal is to break that automatic link your brain has made between the sensation and, intense fear or distress, to learn through experience that the sensation itself isn't dangerous.
Ah, like desensitization.
Sort of.
Yeah.
The sources use that vaccine analogy, which I think is helpful.
A small dose builds immunity or resilience in this case.
Exactly. By bringing them on purposefully, you learn they're tolerable, they pass, and the feared catastrophe doesn't happen.
And the key is not fighting it.
Right. The material really stresses embracing the sensations during the practice. Not distracting, not trying to make them stop, just allowing them.
Okay. Now, the sources get specific with these symptom induction exercises. Sounds intense.
They can be, yeah. But it's personalized. The whole point is to find exercises that trigger sensations similar to what you feel during strong emotions, and that cause you at least, say, moderate distress.
So it's targeted to your specific experience.
Precisely. That physical sensation test form they mention is key for figuring this out. Which exercises work? How distressing are they? How similar do they feel? Using those 0 to 10 scales.
And they list quite a few examples, like hyperventilating for lightheadedness.
Yeah, or breathing through a thin straw to mimic that feeling of not getting enough air, that air hunger linked to anxiety.
Spinning for dizziness, running in place for the heart rate, feeling flushed.
Squats, stairs for heart rate too, burpees, or just putting on a heavy coat indoors to feel hot and sweaty.
Head rolls for dizziness,
Mm-hmm.
staring in a mirror under bright light for disorientation.
Holding weights until you feel shaky. Holding something heavy to feel tired. Even drinking water quickly with a tight belt to feel nauseous or full. It's a broad range.
Lots of options to find what matches your experience.
Right. And the instruction is usually to go full force for about 60 seconds at first.
Maybe longer later on.
Yeah.
And crucially, keep going even when the sensation starts.
Yes. Don't stop the moment you feel it. That would just reinforce the idea that you need to escape it.
Got it. Experience it fully.
And while you're doing it, the focus is purely on the physical sensations.
No distracting yourself, no arguing with the thoughts.
No. Just notice the sensations. Notice any thoughts that come up, but just as, part of the overall experience. Don't get tangled up in them during the exercise itself.
And, very important safety note from the sources, check with a doctor first.
Absolutely crucial. Rule out any medical reasons why these might not be safe for you. They're careful to distinguish physical danger from psychological discomfort.
Okay, so after finding the right exercises, it's about repeated practice.
Yes. The goal then is to repeatedly do the exercises to directly challenge those feared outcomes.
Like the fear of fainting, or having a panic attack, or losing control.
Exactly. You expose yourself to the sensation again and again in a safe setting, and your brain learns, oh, okay, that bad thing I expected, it doesn't actually happen, violating those expectations.
And they suggest doing the same exercise repeatedly in one session.
Yeah, with minimal breaks.
Yeah.
Until that expectation, that fear of the consequence, starts to drop.
Does the distress level always go down?
Often it does, yes. And they give a guideline, like maybe continue until distress is consistently below a 3 out of 10. But that's not the only goal.
What's the main goal then?
It's really about changing your interpretation of the sensations and increasing your willingness to feel them, even if they still feel a bit intense sometimes. It's about reducing the fear of the sensation.
Okay. But what if someone tries this and it just doesn't feel that bad? The exercises aren't distressing.
Good question. The sources has troubleshooting for that. It could mean there's some subtle avoidance happening.
Like not doing it intensely enough?
Maybe. Or maybe you need a different exercise, or to do it for longer, or combine exercises. Sometimes doing it in a slightly more challenging context helps too.
And what about that subtle avoidance? Stopping too soon, or not going full intensity?
That's common. It really requires consciously committing to fully experiencing the sensations, leaning into them rather than pulling back.
Makes sense. What if it's easier to do in, say, a therapy session, but much harder at home alone?
Yeah, the feeling of safety with someone else there can make a difference. The sources suggest graduating the practice.
How so?
Maybe start with a friend or family member nearby. Then maybe the therapist steps out of the room. Then eventually, practice totally alone, building that confidence step by step.
Okay. And what if the fear is really specific to a situation? Like feeling dizzy is okay at home, but terrifying while driving.
They call that conditional aversion.
Yeah.
The work there involves looking at the thoughts, making it seem extra dangerous in that specific situation.
And reminding yourself the sensation itself isn't actually more harmful just because you're driving.
Exactly. The physical sensation is the same. The context changes the perceived threat. Now, if the fear is about visible symptoms in social settings,
Like blushing.
yeah, then they suggest maybe combining this interoceptive work with later real-life exposure to those social situations, tackling both aspects.
Interestingly, the sources say these exercises can be helpful even if you're not particularly afraid of the sensations.
Right, because they still build awareness. Awareness of how emotions feel physically in your body.
And how that physical part connects to thoughts and actions.
Uh-huh. It can make you less reactive, maybe reduce that urgent feeling to do something when an emotion hits. Just practicing mindful awareness of sensations, even mild ones, is valuable.
And it all comes back to practice. Daily practice is emphasized, using that physical sensation practice form to track it.
Yep. And keeping an eye on the bigger picture, too, tracking overall anxiety, depression, general progress towards your goals, connecting this specific technique back to the wider aims.
So wrapping up this deep dive, the big takeaway seems to be physical sensations are normal, important parts of emotion, but our interpretation is key.
Exactly. And by facing these sensations intentionally, repeatedly, safely, through these kinds of exercises, we can lessen their hold on us.
Build that tolerance, that resilience, so we can handle intense emotions better in everyday life.
Precisely. Which leads to that final thought for you, the listener. Think about a time you felt a really strong physical sensation during an emotion.
Yeah.
Now, knowing what we've discussed, how might you think about that or approach it differently next time? What possibilities does this open up for navigating your own emotional world?
Something to really mull over. We hope you keep exploring these ideas, keep practicing. It's definitely a journey building that self-awareness and resilience. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.